My mother invited my estranged father to my wedding, claiming it was time to forgive, but the secret conversation I overheard between them, days before the wedding, completely changed my perception of them both. I grew up without my dad. He left when I was 6, and my mom always told me it was because he couldn't handle the responsibility of being a father. I remember watching her struggle, working late hours, sacrificing everything so I could have a shot at a decent life. I never questioned her version of events because, honestly, it made sense. If he cared, he would have been there. End of story. Fast forward to last year. I got engaged to my partner, Jamie, and we started planning the wedding. My mom, being the only real family I had, was deeply involved in the process. She was my rock through everything, always reminding me how proud she was of the person I'd become. That's why, when she mentioned inviting my dad, I was blindsided. "It's time to forgive, honey," she said one night as we were going through the guest list. "He's still your father. Forgive? For what? Abandoning me? Never reaching out? Never paying a single cent in child support?" I told her there was no way I wanted him at my wedding. She gave me this disappointed look, the kind that made me feel like a bratty teenager again. "It's your wedding," she said finally, "but think about it. People make mistakes." That line stuck with me. People make mistakes, sure. But walking out on your kid isn't just a mistake, it's a choice. Still, I didn't press the issue further. If she wanted to believe he deserved forgiveness, fine. I just didn't agree. A week later, I was at her house dropping off some wedding decor when I overheard voices coming from the living room. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but when I heard my dad's voice, his actual voice, I froze. I hadn't seen or heard from him in over 20 years. "I told you this wasn't a good idea," he said, his tone low but agitated. "She deserves to know the truth," my mom replied, her voice steady but firm. "It's been long enough." "The truth? Do you really think she'll forgive you if she finds out?" My stomach dropped. Forgive you? What the hell was going on? "You were supposed to keep this buried," my dad hissed. "You think throwing me under the bus is going to fix anything? You think she'll love you the same once she knows?" "Don't act like you're innocent," my mom shot back. "You agreed to this just as much as I did." At this point, my mind was racing. I couldn't piece together what they were talking about, but it was clear there was some kind of secret they'd been keeping from me. I leaned in closer, straining to hear every word. "She deserved better than what we gave her," my mom said after a tense pause. Her voice cracked, and for the first time in my life, I heard her sound guilty. "I thought I was doing what was best for her." "You were doing what was best for you," my dad snapped. "Don't pretend this was noble." There was a long silence after that. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears. Finally, my dad spoke again, quieter this time. "If you tell her," he said, "don't expect me to take the fall alone. She deserves the whole story." I couldn't take it anymore. I walked into the room, and they both froze like deer in headlights. My dad looked older than I'd imagined, grayer, thinner, but it was him. My mom's face went pale. "What the hell is going on?" I demanded. "What truth?" Neither of them said anything at first. They just stared at me, like they were hoping the other would step up and take the lead. Finally, my mom sighed and gestured for me to sit down. "This isn't how I wanted you to find out," she said. I crossed my arms. "Find out what?" She hesitated, glancing at my dad, who was now avoiding eye contact entirely. Then she dropped the bombshell. "He didn't abandon us," she said quietly. "I kicked him out." I felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. "What?" She swallowed hard, like the words physically hurt to say. "He didn't want to leave, but I made him go. I told him if he stayed, I'd make sure he never saw you again." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Why would you do that?" Her eyes welled up with tears. "Because I found out he was cheating on me." I glanced at my dad, expecting him to deny it, but he just sat there, staring at the floor, I didn't want you growing up in a broken home, my mom continued, her voice trembling. I thought if I cut him out completely, I could protect you. But it wasn't just about the cheating. She paused, and I could tell she was struggling to find the right words. He threatened to take you away from me. He said if I divorced him, he'd fight for full custody. That's not true, my dad cut in, finally looking up. His voice was calm but firm. I never said that. You did, my mom shot back. Maybe not in so many words, but you made it clear you were willing to fight dirty. I was willing to fight because I loved her, he snapped, pointing at me. I didn't want to lose my daughter. The room fell silent again. I didn't know what to think. On one hand, I understood why my mom might have felt threatened. On the other hand, my dad looked genuinely devastated. And if what he was saying was true, then my entire childhood had been built on a lie. I wrote you letters, my dad said after a long pause. Every birthday, every Christmas. I sent money too. I didn't want you to think I didn't care. What letters? I asked, my voice shaking. He turned to my mom. She never got them, did she? My mom looked away, and that was all the confirmation I needed. Are you serious? I said, my voice rising. You hid his letters? His money? You let me believe he didn't care? I was trying to protect you, she cried. I didn't want you to grow up resenting me for staying with him, and I didn't want you to get hurt if he disappeared again. That wasn't your decision to make, I shouted. You lied to me my whole life. Tears were streaming down her face now, but I didn't care. I felt betrayed by both of them, my dad for cheating and my mom for manipulating the narrative. For the first time, I didn't know who to trust. The days leading up to the wedding were a mess. I told my mom I needed space and barely spoke to her. I met with my dad a few times to hear his side of the story, but even he admitted he wasn't innocent. He owned up to the affair but insisted he never wanted to abandon me. He seemed genuinely remorseful, but after everything I wasn't sure if I could fully believe him. I didn't know what to do after finding all this out. The wedding was just days away, and my entire world felt like it had been flipped upside down. I couldn't look at my mom without feeling this deep anger bubbling inside me, and every time I thought about my dad, there was this aching sadness that wouldn't go away. How was I supposed to celebrate one of the happiest days of my life when my past had just been shattered? That night, I told Jamie everything. I hadn't wanted to drag him into the mess, but I needed someone to talk to. He listened quietly, holding my hand the whole time, and when I finally finished spilling everything, he said something I didn't expect. You don't have to make a decision right now, he said gently. This is your wedding, not theirs. You don't owe them anything. It was exactly what I needed to hear. For so long, I'd been thinking about what my mom wanted, or what my dad deserved, or how their presents would look to the guests. But Jamie was right. It was my day. If I didn't feel ready to face them, then I didn't have to. I went to bed that night feeling a small sense of relief, even though I knew the storm wasn't over. The next day, my mom showed up at my apartment unannounced. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept all night. For a moment, I thought she was there to apologize, but instead, she handed me a small box. These are the letters, she said quietly. The ones he sent you. I stared at the box, unsure if I even wanted to open it. Part of me felt like it was too little, too late, but another part of me, one I hated to admit, was curious. I know I was wrong, she said, her voice trembling. I know you'll probably never forgive me, and I don't blame you, but I hope one day you'll understand why I did what I did. I didn't say anything. I just took the box and closed the door. For a long time, I just sat there staring at it, trying to decide if I should even open it. In the end, curiosity won out. The letters were heartbreaking. Some of them were short, just a few sentences wishing me a happy birthday or telling me he loved me. Others were pages long, filled with stories about his life and memories of when I was little. There were drawings, postcards, even a picture of him holding me when I was a baby. And then there was the money, crisp $100 bills tucked into some of the envelopes, untouched. I cried for hours reading those letters. It was like meeting a version of my dad I never knew existed, a version my mom had kept hidden from me. And as much as I wanted to hate her for it, I couldn't deny that her fear and pain were real too. It was a tangled mess of emotions that I wasn't sure I'd ever fully unravel. The next day I met with my dad. I brought the box with me and set it on the table between us. He looked at it for a long time, then back at me. "You got them?" he asked softly. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. "I'm sorry," he said, "for everything. For cheating on your mom, for not fighting harder to stay in your life, for all of it. I should have done better." For the first time, I saw him not as the villain in my mom's story, but as a flawed, broken human being. And maybe that was the hardest part, realizing that no one in this mess was truly innocent. The wedding day finally came, and I made the decision to keep both of them at a distance. My mom stayed in the back row, and my dad wasn't invited at all. It was painful, but it was what I needed to do for myself. This wasn't their story. It was mine. After the wedding, I decided to take a break from both of them. No more guilt, no more explanations. I needed time to figure out what kind of relationship I wanted with them moving forward, if any. And maybe that's where the story ends for now. Not with forgiveness, not with closure, but with me finally putting myself first.